So, we have made a lot of good points so far, whether that be about electric cars or the carbon dividend. But now I'd like to talk about what I think is the most courageous um, innovation within uh, the environmental industry. While it does require coordination with the fossil fuel industry, it still aims to better uh, the emissions levels that we have coming from our power plants. And this technology is called carbon capture and sequestration technology. And if you are unfamiliar with this technology and have never heard of it, that shouldn't be all that surprising because it is mostly an unknown at this point. While there are plants that are up and running currently throughout the United States, not every state has a facility that is capturing carbon. This is for many reasons, one of which could be the fact that fossil fuel industries or the fossil fuel industry does not want to admit to any wrongdoing. Um, if they install these throughout the nation, they're essentially admitting that the emissions that come from their power plants are an issue and that climate change is something that must be addressed. For the time being, I think they feel comfortable enough in ignoring that fact. Well, this should be something that is promoted across the board by all US citizens because it shouldn't be something that comes out of our pockets. It's something that should be coming out of the fossil fuel industry's pockets and something encouraged by government. If they're truly for the people, by the people, then this is something that should have unanimous support within politics, whether you're on the right or the left. We have done so much to allow these fossil fuel giants to instill themselves within our country and give them just a great amount of wealth. So, as a way to repay us, at the very least, they should be installing these. This is a very simple thing that could be done. While the other reason is that the science is not 100% certain on the repercussions of installing something such as a carbon capture and sequestration facility, depending on especially how they ultimately accomplish this. Uh, there are multiple ways to go about this, which I will get into in a second. But I guess the very first thing I want to do is describe what it is. And it's a chemical and physical process by which carbon is removed from a flue of gases, whether it be from the open air or within an industrial facility where coal has either just been burned and that flue gas is consisting of whatever is the result of burning that coal, or it's pre-combustion where um, yes, the coal has been burned, but it's not it's not in the haystack. It's not going up and leaving the facility quite yet. It's still yet in the process of turning turbines, which then generate electricity, things like that. Um, that there could be hydrogen and CO2, and if you insert water, then you could separate the CO. Or originally, it's CO, so carbon monoxide and hydrogen. If you insert water, that creates CO2 and hydrogen. And the hydrogen could then be used to still create that electricity that we were looking for in the first place um, by burning it. And then we could then store the CO2 by separating the two. This is always done through some sort of chemical process, some filtration process. It differs amongst the different types of carbon capture and sequestration, but nonetheless, the engineers there have devised a way in which they can do this. Um, Two disparities that are key here are direct air capture and non-direct air capture. And like I touched on, some of the flue gases that are being uh, taken from are within an industrial facility, and some are not. Some of them are just from the open air. So obviously, the direct air capture is referring to the process where there's a facility that's not just taking um, the flue gas from an industrial facility, a power plant that's just burned coal, but instead it's just taking it straight from the air in the wilderness or just in the wide open. And this is the most unproven of the technologies, but it's also the most innovative because rather than just focusing on hey, we have to reduce the emissions that are coming whenever we do burn coal to produce electricity, which is extremely important. And it goes along with the thinking of electric cars um, and solar panels, things like that. Hey, let's cut down the emissions. This direct air capture actually removes emissions that have already been made. So rather than just trying to slow the clock, slow it from ticking, we could actually turn it back a little bit. And that's what direct air capture could do. The other thing is, right now, it's the most costly. Um, and when it's not necessarily tied to a fossil fuel company implementing it alongside their power plants, it can be harder to find the funds to put these facilities into place. But there should be a way in which we can connect the dots. How the government plans to do that, that's up to them. But through some creative thinking, I think that this could easily be done. Um, Also, it's a matter of getting the technology to a point where we're confident in the repercussions of it and its effectiveness, and making sure that it's cost effective enough to a point where it makes people interested in uh, investing. Because while it might cost us something, or even a good amount, we can't be mortgaging our future entirely just to do this. We have to be realistic. We have to try to preserve our lifestyles as best we can. Um, but still, it's a problem that must be addressed. I think the only way it does get addressed is if we just make it a top priority and staunchly stand by the fact that we need to do this. It's not a one size fits all solution. Nothing is. Like I said, reducing emissions is a huge component of this. Solar panels, windmills, hydroelectric power, even nuclear power, which has its own issues in it of itself. There has to be a lot of steps taken to resolve this issue. But to me, this is the turning point. This is what could really do it for us. This is the beacon of hope, the beacon of light. Um, but we can't just rest solely on this, put all our eggs in one basket. We still have to diversify our assets and make sure that we're still pressing for environmental policy elsewhere as well. But also, I want to talk about the different types of non direct air capture methods because these are really more contingent on how exactly the power plant is operating in the first place. So, depending on how the coal or the gas is being burned, the cycle in which they use, you might want to use pre-combustion or post-combustion. The advantages, the disadvantages of the two haven't really been analyzed enough to a point to say one's better than the other, but they are certainly different in that in a pre-combustion